Hello everybody. Today now we'll have another session in microeconomics. Now today in microeconomics we'll discuss with the demand in analysis part, which basically we are continuing. So in the demand analysis part, today we'll discuss cause of downward sloping demand curve. Okay, so today first we'll discuss cause of downward sloping demand curve. Then we'll discuss cause of upward sloping demand curve. Okay, then we'll discuss exception to the law of demand, that is Giffen paradox. Okay, so these things we will discuss today session. So first we'll start with the cause. Cause means reason of downward sloping demand curve. Why demand curve slope downward? Okay, basically see the work of the demand curve is basically related to the sloping downward. So why there may be a question that why demand curve slope downward means it is having a downward movement. As you can see in the graph also, this is demand curve. Okay, in the previous session also you have seen the demand curve. So why it is sloping downward, that we will discuss. And a question also may come that what are the reason of downward sloping demand curve, or discuss the causes of downward sloping demand curve. So there are mainly 6 reasons today we'll discuss, and due to this reason demand curve basically having a downward sloping. Now first reason is the application of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay, one reason is application of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now in one session we have discussed the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now the law of diminishing marginal utility indicates that when a person consume a product or good in succession, means one after another, the satisfaction level goes down, or the utility of the product goes down, and after sometimes it become negative. Okay, like we can take example of a thirsty person again. If a person is feeling thirsty, the person will look for plain water or cold drinks. But whatever like cold drinks or plain water, if a thirsty person want to take, but there will be a limit, like one glass of plain water, then another glass of plain water, then after sometimes person will not be able to take more water. He will be satisfied, his or her thirstiness will go away. So this is basically the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now due to this demand curve having a downward sloping. Now in the graph you can see that y-axis represent the price and the x-axis represent the demand. You can see the cursor. Now in the y-axis, price are having 3 points: PO, P2, P, then PO, P2. Now if we see that PO is the price. Okay, now if the price come down to P2, okay, if the price reduces and come down to P2, then consumer will start consuming more of that particular good, and consumption will increase up to this point C. Okay, now when price will fall down, consumer will purchase more of the good and consumer will start consuming. But as per the law of diminishing marginal utility, after some times, consumer will be satisfied with the consumption of the goods, and consumer may not have, more demand for these goods. And this is the reason why the demand curve sloped downward. Okay, so here we can see the application of the law of diminishing marginal utility in case of the law of demand. Okay, so this is basically the first reason. Then second reason, new consumer. Now when the price of a good or service fall down, new consumer start consuming that product. Okay, when the price of a good or product or service fall down, new consumer start consuming that product. Okay, now due to that, what happens? The demand curve having a downward sloping movement, and after some times, when many people will consume the product, then demand will increase, and when demand will increase, price may again increase. So this may happen in the long run. Okay, now another reason is the income effect. In the income effect, what happens? When the price falls, okay, when the price falls, the real income of the consumer increases. Real income means the money which customer can spend. Okay, or the savings which customer can spend for necessary purpose. Okay, so when price fall down, the real income of the consumer increase. Like if the price of a good earlier was 10 rupees per kilo, now it's come down to 5. Okay, so if the consumer were purchasing 5 kilo in a month, so consumer can save money as it is come down to 5. Okay, like 5 into 10. So total 50 rupees earlier customer was spending. Now if the price reduced to 5 per kilo, then 5 into 5, 25 rupees. That means 50% income is increasing due to the fall in the price. Okay, now when consumer will demanding more of this particular product, demand will increase, and with that increasing demand, price may again increase. Now if the price go beyond 10, okay, that will affect the consumer income. Consumer income will reduce. This is basically the income effect. This is known as income effect. Okay, now initially what happens when price fall down? As I said, the real income of the consumer increases, and due to that, consumer can purchase more of that particular goods. And this is another reason why the demand curve having a downward sloping. Then substitution effect. Now when the price of a product fall down, the substitution effect does not work. Okay, like if we compare tea and tea and coffee. Okay, tea and coffee, these are substitute to each other. Now if the price of the tea fall down, consumer may start purchasing more of the tea, but they will not shift to the coffee. Okay, so substitution will remain same. Substitute product price remain unchanged because we have assumed it in the assumption of the law of demand. So it will be remaining same, but when the price of a product falls down due to the substitution effect, demand curve will have a downward sloping. Then huge lower income group. Okay, like a country like India. Okay, you know, a maximum number of people are having lower income, low income. So when price fall down, maximum people try to purchase that product or good. Maximum people try to consume that good. Okay, and due to that, the demand curve having a downward sloping movement as the demand increases. Then alternative uses. Now in the alternative uses, like here, you know, the uses of the product. Okay, like if we think about the uses of the product, what are the alternative use a product may have? So alternative uses of the product is also one reason why demand curve having a downward sloping movement. Now, for example, like if we think about the electricity price per unit. Now, if the price of the electricity per unit increases, then consumer may not use it for other purpose. Other purpose means like, you know, for heating purpose. Okay, room heater consumer may not use, then AC may not be used, then, you know, induction cooker may not be used. But if the price per unit of the electricity goes down, consumption of these alternative uses of the electricity will increase. Okay, so this kind of alternative uses also are reason behind the downward sloping of the demand curve. So these are the some reason due to this demand curve having a slope downward. Next, we will move to the reason for upward slope of the demand curve. Reason for upward slope of the demand curve, or causes for upward slope of the demand curve. Okay, now here question may come, discuss the reason for upward slope of the demand curve, or critically examine the causes for upward slope of the demand curve. So to get the answer, we will discuss different reasons of the upward slope of the demand curve. Okay, now there are mainly three reasons. Like here you can see y-axis price and the x-axis quantity demanded. Now the demand curve having a upward slope. Okay, this in the earlier case we have seen demand curve was sloping downward. Okay, but here we can see the demand curve having a upward slope in the figure 5. Now, what are the reasons? There are mainly three reasons. Number one reason is war. Okay, when there is a war in any country and the news spreads, now possibility is that due to the war, production process may get hampered. So as the production process may get hampered, so scarcity or shortage of goods may exist or come into picture in the market. And with that fear, consumer start purchasing more. Consumer also start stocking the goods. Then a retailer, wholesaler, you know, stockist, super stockist, they may also start stocking the good. Okay, with the assumption that war started, then, you know, production process may get hampered, then transportation may get hampered, and we should stock the goods for the near future consumption. So when this kind of thinking will increase, everybody will try to purchase. Okay, every consumer will try to purchase more and more unit of product or good. And in that case, demand curve will be a upward sloping. Demand curve will have a upward sloping movement, because that time price will increase, demand will also increase. What I said, in this case, price will also increase and demand will also increase, because due to the afraidness that there will be shortage of goods, consumer will try to buy more, then with that demand will increase very hugely, okay, in an unexpected manner, and with that price will also increase. So one reason is that during the war, demand curve may have a upward sloping movement. Then another reason is depression. Now going to the depression, first we'll discuss what is depression is. Now, after some times, we'll go through one chapter, business cycle. In business cycle, we'll go through the 4 stages of the business cycle. Now, among those 4 stages, one stage is depression. Now, just I'll tell what the depression stage indicates in a business cycle. Depression stage indicates, very bad phase of the economy. What I said, very bad phase of the economy. Now, in that depression phase, what happens? New company do not come into existence. Like companies, those who are doing business, they will not, do further investment. Expansion will not happen. So, as new investment will not come, new expansion of the business will not happen, employment generation will be totally closed. Then companies, those who are doing business, they will be bound to lay off or terminate employees. They may, withdraw business from different locations. And due to this, purchase power of the consumer usually goes down during the depression phase of the economy. The purchasing power of the consumer usually goes down. Now that time, companies gives huge promotion to encourage purchase, so that customer come forward and purchase goods. But as the consumer purchase power goes down, consumer are not able to purchase. Okay, and that time also demand curve will have a upward movement. Now again, I am just summing it up. During the depression phase of the economy, consumer purchasing power usually goes down. And that time, if company gives promotion also, they give discount also, the sale of the company does not increase. Okay, so as it is not increased, and the demand curve will have a upward sloping movement. Then another is Giffen paradox. So Giffen paradox, we will understand it in a different way. Like to make it simple, just I am giving you the summary of the Giffen paradox. Giffen paradox refers to the economic concept through which inferior goods demand increase when the price increase. What I said, there are some goods, and for those goods, when price increase, demand also increase. Now this will go through in a different way. There are 3 reasons why demand curve have a upward slope. These are war, depression, then Giffen paradox. Now we'll go through this part, exception to the law of demand. Now see, Giffen paradox is a reason why demand curve have a upward movement. Now there is another part of the economy, exception to the law of demand. Now, exception to the law of demand basically we'll understand through Giffen paradox. Okay. Now, Giffen paradox concept, just I have said you. Now we'll go through the more detail of the Giffen paradox. Now, Giffen paradox, this concept are being introduced by Scottish journalist and statistician Sir Robert Giffen. Okay, and according to him, Giffen goods is a good which does not appear to conform to the first rule of demand. First rule of demand means price increase, demand decrease, price decrease, demand increase. So it is not following this rule of demand, first law of demand. Okay, now for a given good, people will actually demand more when the price rise. What I said earlier, for a given good, when people will demand more when price will increase. The generally accepted explanation is that given goods are a type of inferior good without a substitute. So there is no substitution effect at work when the price change. In addition, the assumption is that spending on goods accounts for a large share of income. Okay, now see, simply you can keep in mind, people will demand more of some kind of good when price will increase. This is basically the Giffen paradox concept, and in that case, demand curve will have a downward movement. Upward movement. Okay, now example like bread, bajra, potatoes, salt, rice, maize, etc. These are all we can consider as inferior goods. Now think that if the price of the rice increases, we cannot reduce the consumption of the rice. We need to consume as you are consuming. Okay, so when price will increase of rice or salt also, or other like potatoes, so demand may also increase because people will start buying. People will want to stock more of that particular good. As price will have a increasing trend, so with the effort that price may increase more and more, people will start buying. So that start buying will increase the demand also. Okay, so this is basically also known as exception to the law of demand. Question may come, discuss the exception to the law of demand with example. Example is given below. Example I have discussed, like in case of salt, it can happen. In case of rice, it can happen. In case of wheat. Okay, here bajra, maize, bread is mentioned, but another example you can include here, wheat. In case of wheat also, like in Punjab, they consume wheat, like as we consume rice. In Punjab, Punjabis they consume the wheat, then maize, like this commodity. Now, if price of the wheat increases, so demand may also increase, and this is basically exception to the law of demand. Exception to the law of demand means it is not following the law of demand. It is different from the law of demand. And what is the law of demand? If price increase, demand decrease. If price decrease, demand increase. So this is basically the law of demand. And in case of inferior goods like rice, salt, potatoes, bajra, wheat, maize, even bread, the law of demand does not work. These are considered as an exception to the law of demand. And this concept in economics are being introduced by a Scottish journalist and statistician, and sir name is Mr. Robert Giffen. Okay, so this is basically the Giffen paradox. Okay, and now we'll go through the today's session summary. See, today what we have discussed broadly 3 areas. First, we have discussed causes of downward sloping demand curve. Cause of downward sloping demand curve. Then next, we have discussed reason of upward slope of the demand curve. Reason for upward slope of the demand curve. Then we have discussed exception to the law of demand, Giffen paradox. Okay, so these are the 3 broad areas we have discussed. Now again, just I will give you the highlight of this. Now in the causes of downward sloping demand curve, we have discussed cause like application of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Then we have discussed new consumer, then income effect, substitution effect, use lower income group, then alternative uses of the good. So these are the some cause due to this demand curve having a downward sloping or downward movement. Here you can see downward movement. Okay, BAC, this is basically the demand curve and having a downward movement. Next, we have discussed reason for upward slope of the demand curve. Now in this, we have discussed 3 main reasons. First, war, then depression, then Giffen paradox. Okay, so these are the 3 reasons for which demand curve having a upward slope or upward movement. Then next, we have discussed exception to the law of demand. Exception to the law of demand through Giffen paradox. Okay, so here we have discussed some example also. Question may come, see, from this session, mainly there are 3 question answer we have addressed. First question, what are the reason of downward slope of the demand curve? First question. Second, what are the reason of upward slope of the demand curve? Then discuss the exception to the law of demand with example. Another question may come from here, define Giffen paradox. Define Giffen paradox with example. Or what is Giffen paradox? Give example. So like this 3-4 question we have addressed from this session. Now thank you everybody for attending today's session. Next session we'll discuss.
Thank you.
Next session we'll discuss elasticity of demand.